Imagine a wild chimpanzee standing in front of a hollow log with food hidden deep inside. Notice how it inspects the small hole, turns to a nearby bush, snaps off a twig, skillfully strips away the leaves, and probes the branch into the cavity to pull out the meal. The whole process takes just a few minutes. Now, put an inexperienced ancient human in front of that exact same challenge. He fumbles around, picks the wrong tool, strikes the wrong spot, and breaks his stick. If you only judge this brief moment in time, the animal looks far more efficient, better adapted, and much faster at solving the problem. But let's return to that exact same spot 500 years later. The chimpanzee is still standing in front of a hollow log, and it is still stripping leaves off a twig to fish out its food. Nothing has changed. Meanwhile, the descendants of that ancient human aren't using twigs anymore. They have built complex machines. Why is there such a staggering gap? Why did even the smartest animals, possessing remarkable memories and expert tool-making skills, ultimately get left behind by our ancestors? The answer to this paradox isn't about who solved the puzzle faster in the beginning. It lies in something entirely different. The chimpanzee solved the problem for its own lifetime, while the human turned that problem into permanent knowledge for people who hadn't even been born yet. We often carry the mistaken belief that biological intelligence runs up a single vertical ladder with humans sitting at the very top and animals scattered on the rungs below. But nature doesn't work that way. Intelligence is a diverse web of adaptive solutions. A crow can excel at causal reasoning. A dolphin can navigate intricate social hierarchies. An elephant possessing a phenomenal spatial memory can recognize the distinct calls of hundreds of other individuals. And an albatross can navigate unerringly across thousands of miles of featureless open ocean, a task where a human stripped of modern navigation tools would be completely helpless. Animals are not stupid, nor are they trapped in robotic, mindless instinct. They learn, they use tools, and they even possess their own forms of culture. Archaeologists have discovered that wild capuchin monkeys in South America have been using stone hammers to crack open hard nuts continuously for the last 3,000 years. Even the techniques and the shapes of their stone tools have evolved over different historical eras. So if animals have memory tools, cognition, and even enduring traditions, where is the real dividing line? Why is a chimpanzee's technology still a stick after thousands of years, while human technology exploded from a split stone to a space station? The secret lies in an exquisitely subtle evolutionary mechanism. Human supremacy does not reside inside a single, isolated brain. It lives in the interactive space between brains. Picture a prehistoric afternoon more than 3 million years ago at an ancient stone knapping site. An experienced adult picks up a nodule of flint. He turns it over in his hands, finding the perfect angle, selects a hammerstone of just the right density, and strikes a precise, decisive blow against the rock's weakest point. A sharp-edged flake shears off. Sitting right next to him, a young child is watching intently. The action looks simple enough, but when the child tries to imitate it, he fails. He strikes too straight, holds the wrong angle, and picks the wrong kind of rock. This is where the magic of the human lineage appears. The adult doesn't just walk away. He slows down his movements, gently takes the child's hands to correct his posture, places a more brittle piece of stone into his palm, and allows him to practice over and over again. That angled flake of stone might look primitive, but it is not just a physical object. It is the crystallization of a complex sequence of cognitive decisions passed directly from one human to another. Scientists call this phenomenon the cultural ratchet effect. A mechanical ratchet is a gear with a spring-loaded pawl that only allows the system to rotate forward, locking it in place to prevent it from slipping backward to its starting point. In the wild, when a brilliant crow or chimpanzee invents a clever new foraging trick, that knowledge is usually imprisoned within its own individual brain. When that animal dies, its invention dies with it. The next generation has to start from scratch all over again. But for our ancestors, The cultural ratchet clicked locked. When one ancient human figured out how to fracture a stone to create a sharp cutting edge, a second person learned that technique. A third person realized that chipping a few tiny flakes off the edge made the blade even sharper. A fourth person figured out how to use tree resin to bind that blade onto a wooden shaft. Not a single one of them invented the complete hunting spear from scratch. The next generation didn't have to reinvent the wheel. They stood on the shoulders of those who came before them, using the solutions of the dead as the starting line for their own lives. However, if we only relied on exact imitation, the ratchet could still get jammed. Many species can copy behaviors. The profound human difference lies in our capacity for causal reasoning. When observing a tool, our ancestors didn't just blindly mimic the physical motions of the hands. They tried to understand the underlying why. Why does striking at this specific angle cause the stone to fracture? Why is this species of wood more resilient than another? Grasping the underlying cause grants an unmatched superpower. It allows a person to repair a broken tool even when the original inventor is no longer around to demonstrate how. It allows someone to take the mechanical principle of a sharp point designed for piercing animal hide and adapt it to create a bone needle for sewing warm garments. Imitation preserves a solution, but understanding the underlying mechanics is what allows that solution to escape its original problem and expand into thousands of entirely new domains. And to make this ratchet spin even faster, a massive catalyst entered the picture in increasingly sophisticated forms of communication and eventually language. You can use physical gestures to show a child how to hold a rock or where to find berry bushes right in front of your eyes. But you cannot use non-verbal mime to warn that child. Do not cross the valley behind the mountain during the cold season because the predators return there. Or, this root is edible, but you must boil it 3 times in fresh water or it will kill you. Symbolic communication allows knowledge to travel beyond immediate observable time and space. It lets humans transmit warnings about dangers they haven't even seen yet, share lessons from the distant past, and strategize for the coming seasons. Knowledge no longer requires a physical object present in the room to be passed along. It was precisely this ability to communicate about the unseen that gave birth to a form of cooperation never before witnessed in the animal kingdom: the capacity to share complex, long-term goals. Many animals cooperate to hunt prey or defend their territory, but their actions happen simultaneously in real time. An ancient human band operated differently. They could break down a massive, complex goal into invisible, individual tasks that took place across different times and different locations. Today, one person walks deep into the forest to harvest the densest wood. Another hikes down to the riverbed to gather flint. A third group stays at camp boiling birch bark down into adhesive resin. Only tomorrow do they reconvene to assemble those individual elements into a synchronized arsenal of hunting weapons. No single person carried out the whole process alone, but every single one of them held the exact same shared blueprint in their minds. Of course, whenever a cooperative network grows large enough to include individuals who aren't close blood relatives, it immediately slams into an inherent evolutionary threat: free riders and cheaters. What happens if an individual refuses to gather firewood, but insists on sitting by the warmth of the fire? What happens if the strongest hunter hoards all the meat for himself? Without protective mechanisms, that cooperation would quickly collapse. And so our ancestors developed a new invisible layer of armor, social norms, and reputation systems. Human cooperation isn't just fueled by innate kindness. It survives because communities started remembering very clearly who contributed and who refused to help. Shared rules about fairness, about who had the right to use specific tools, which behaviors were celebrated, and which were punished, acted as the social glue, binding complete strangers together into a unified, functioning superorganism. This brings us to a fascinating thought experiment that flips our traditional view of individual intelligence completely upside down. The smartest individual does not always build the most successful tribe. Imagine two neighboring ancient tribes. The first tribe is home to an absolute individual genius, a lone mastermind, who single-handedly invents a brilliantly complex animal trap. But this genius is secretive and solitary. He doesn't let anyone watch him work, he refuses to teach the children, and he hoards his techniques for himself. The day he dies, in a sudden hunting accident, that entire leap of technological progress vanishes from the earth with him. Now look at the second tribe. They don't have a single genius among them. But they practice a very different habit. They constantly watch one another. They encourage their children to handle the tools, they openly debate their failures, and they willingly trade materials with the band across the river. When an elder passes away, his crafting techniques don't die with him because 5 other people in the camp have already memorized their own versions of it. Over generations, the tribe without a genius ends up possessing vastly superior technology than the tribe with the mastermind. Cultural evolution does not simply reward the single smartest inventor. It rewards the population that is best at preserving and sharing its common discoveries. And this is where the concept of the collective brain reveals its true power. A complex skill is just like a fragile flame. If only one person holds it, a single gust of wind, an accident, or an illness can blow it out forever. But when you have a social network that is large enough and tightly connected, that flame is shared among dozens of different torches. You have more models to learn from, more room for trial and error, and if one small family unit accidentally forgets how to shape a specific tool, they can simply relearn it from a neighboring group. The technological power of a community is dictated by the size of its population and the density of its social connections, not just the cubic centimeters inside each individual skull. We also have to humbly recognize that the cultural ratchet is not a magical escalator that only moves upward. When social networks fracture, human culture can, and does, go backward. Archaeological records show us that during periods in history, when human populations shrank dramatically due to rapid climate change, or when small groups became geographically isolated from the broader network, they genuinely lost the complex technologies their ancestors once mastered. Reverting to much simpler tools, we learned how to accumulate knowledge. But we were never handed a permanent lifetime warranty for it if we sever the threads of our own connections. When you look at an ancient stone tool that is hundreds of thousands of years old, you aren't just looking at a rock. You are looking at externalized memory. A perfectly flaked hand axe is an ancient cognitive decision frozen in physical form. When a young child from a later generation picked up that tool, they didn't need to hear the original maker explain it in words. Simply by feeling the weight, the balance, the length, and the angles of the edge, the physical geometry of the object automatically downloaded information directly into the user's brain. The tool wasn't just an instrument. It was a physical storage drive for human memory long before written language ever existed. Cumulative culture eventually carried us across an even more extraordinary threshold. Our technology began to become smarter than the very people using it. There are indigenous tribes today who know exactly how to prepare a highly toxic root into safe, nutritious food through an agonizingly complex procedure, grinding, boiling it multiple times, leaving it in the sun, and letting it ferment for a precise number of days. If you ask them why every single step is necessary, they cannot answer you with modern chemical equations. They simply know that if you skip a step, the person who eats it will die. This life-saving preparation technique was refined over centuries of trial and error, stripping away the fatal variations and preserving the sequence that kept the tribe alive. The entire community owns a foolproof life-saving solution, even though not a single individual among them can fully explain the underlying chemistry. Now, take a look at yourself today. You might feel a sense of pride in our modern technological civilization. But the humbling truth is, you cannot independently manufacture even the simplest things you rely on every single day. Look at the smartphone sitting in your hand right now. You know how to swipe the screen and open applications. But do you know how to mine raw lithium out of the earth? Do you know how to smelt metal, refine silicon, fabricate microscopic transistors, and program the entire operating system from absolute scratch? Not a single human being on this planet could build a modern smartphone alone from top to bottom. That device exists only because the knowledge required to create it is fragmented and distributed across a massive collective brain of millions of people spanning across nations, across scientific disciplines, and inheriting the accumulated work of thousands of inventors who died centuries ago. The true intelligence of humanity has never been locked away in the private vault of an individual skull. We didn't conquer this planet because every one of us was born a lone genius. We succeeded because we are the only species that figured out how to wire our brains together across physical space and through the deep corridors of time. The smartest animal on Earth can easily beat a human in a one-on-one test of immediate individual problem solving. But that animal always has to fight alone. Meanwhile, every single human being steps into this world, backed by the invisible accumulated power of millions of ancestral minds quietly working alongside us. If you love peeling back the layers of everyday assumptions to explore the strange, deep evolutionary roots that shaped human behavior and intelligence, keep exploring with Cave Curious. Because sometimes humanity's greatest superpower is something that never belonged to any single one of us at all. We'll see you around the campfire for our next journey into the strange, uncharted corners of the human story.